Today on Education Forum, a meeting with the mayor, an interview with the mayor of Columbus, Georgia. From the studio, high atop Jordan Hall in the College of Education and Health Professions at Columbus State University in Columbus, Georgia, this is Education Forum with your hosts Jeff Conklin and Greg Blaylock. Welcome to Education Forum. I'm Jeff Conklin here with my co-host Greg Blaylock. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
And our very special guest today on Education Forum is the mayor of Columbus, Georgia, Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. Welcome, Mayor.
Hi, good to see you.
Glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
You're such a busy person. We're honored to be able to get on your schedule.
I
And so
enjoy
we're
this.
great. And I see you around town constantly at all kinds of events, so I know you're extremely busy. So we're glad you're here.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
We wanted to start out today talking a little bit about your first couple of years in office.
Right.
And what you're most proud of in this first 2 years since you were elected mayor.
Yeah, a couple of things. Well, first of all, we had massive pension reform, which is very boring, but nets millions of dollars in savings to the taxpayers is also something very difficult to do.
Oh, yes.
A lot of mayors are in federal courts across the country
Really?
because they try to adjust their pensions, and of course that can involve employment laws and all sorts of
Union
things and contracts and things. But we did it without any strikes. We did it without any turmoil. We had about 10 months of some pretty healthy debate, I would say.
Okay.
And then to my great amazement, it passed unanimously 10 months later. But also, when I took office, the euthanasia rate at our Animal Care and Control Center was 80%.
Yes, yes. I
And had
remember
been
that,
80% for years, and it's now down to 35%.
That's great.
And continuing to fall. So it just showed how revamping some policies and procedures, taking more active, proactive roles and things, leveraging volunteers, can make a huge, huge difference. And I think that's important. Opening closed rec centers.
Yes,
We had these mega rec centers like Shirley Winston and some others, which are huge assets to the community. But they closed the small, more modest rec centers that were embedded into neighborhoods that were much in need. And so children don't make appointments to play.
No.
They don't like to catch the bus to play. And so we've been trying to reopen those rec centers embedded in those communities that are in need so that children can simply walk to a place, have some refuge, and have programming, Parks and Rec programming. And so far, it's been a great success.
It
So,
sounds like it. It's
it's a lot of fun, very satisfying.
Well, and we're headed into the summer.
Yes.
And we're going to have those youth home from school.
That's right.
And what kind of programs are available in the city?
Well, a couple of things. We have recreational programs for maybe some of the younger folks, folks of all ages, actually. And those are through our Parks and Rec department. So again, we have the super centers, we have organized sports teams. You can contact 311 or go to our website and look for our Parks and Rec programming, and I think you'll be amazed at what all is out there and being offered. But when it comes to job training, things of that nature, we have almost 9,000 high school students in Columbus, Georgia. That's a lot of kids to be out. And some of those will find jobs in the private sector, certainly. But we offer over 300 jobs through our workforce investment program. You can dial 311 or go to the Department of Labor website and link to our workforce investment programming and see if there's something there that might interest you as a young person. And then also we do offer internships. Now they don't pay. The internships don't pay. Those are more volunteer positions, but I will tell you that you really can get some fantastic experience. We have people working in the mayor's office through intern programs, city manager's office, and you're really going to be doing substantive work.
That's a great opportunity.
And these opportunities are for high school students, these internship opportunities?
Yes, they're for high school students and also for college students. I believe we have one already that may be a CSU student that's committed for this summer. I'll have to check that, but that individual will be helping support and research for the possibility of us obtaining a veterans hospital here in Columbus, Georgia.
Wow. Tremendous.
So there's a commission that we're putting together of those interested in that, and we need some support.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now you've had a lot of experience, obviously, leading up to becoming mayor, both in the private industry and then in public service as well. And I'm just curious, over these last 2 years as mayor of Columbus, what aspect of your job has been most surprising to you that you didn't expect? Or
well, I guess one thing that's difficult to deal with is that there's a high level of citizen frustration, I think, in any community, and most of that frustration, not all of it certainly, most of it comes from a misunderstanding of process or misunderstanding of capability of government. For instance, I received a very angry email this morning from a woman who was very upset at some medical care she had received and thought the city needed to intervene immediately to correct the situation. And so you have to have discussions often of the roles of the city and the private sector and people we may have affiliations with, but we certainly don't control.
Of course,
and so we become a big resource guide, referring them to the right entity to help them. And so a lot of times you will hear public vitriol, perhaps, and that's always very frustrating to take and absorb, but it's very satisfying once you get them directed in the correct position, which is one of the reasons why we have the Let's Talk with the Mayor forums that we do quarterly. And usually what happens is you can walk into the room, feel the tension and frustration, the anger just bubbling, and you start opening it up for live mic. And once somebody has had the opportunity to give you, 2 minutes of a piece of their mind, first of all, that's cathartic in and of itself.
Yes, it is.
And then usually what follows is information.
Sure.
And when they realize, oh, well, I didn't realize that was another entity, or that you are actually looking into that and progress has been made, then it dials back. So, I wouldn't say, obviously that's a function of the government. A little surprising in how often it occurs, but one of the major components of the job of the mayor is to impart information to the public and to make sure if you can't facilitate solutions that you give the public tools that they can implement. And so it can be frustrating from both sides of the equation, but once you've gone through it, it's actually very satisfying.
It's interesting you bring up those discussions with the mayor that you have throughout the city throughout the year. I see those across the country as becoming, it seems like they're becoming a little more popular. I see more communities doing that sort of thing. And even within our community, I see the local school board is, I forget off the top of my head what they're calling it, but
they're going
3 or 4 times a year, they're going to be doing a very similar thing where people can come and interface with the school board and bring up issues, ask questions, and basically get information about what the school board might be doing.
Yeah, it speaks to the evolving complexity of our communities today as opposed to times in the past. People have direct access to information and through the internet and other means, 24-hour news programs like this, our cable program for the city, and they expect direct access to their leaders. And whereas in times of the past there were more surrogates, for instance, you may work for a very large company and you expected your bosses to be the ones dealing with the mayor and making sure that things associated with your life were handled properly, or your pastor, or you may be a member of a fraternal organization or Masons organization, and you used the leaders of those organizations as your conduit to, quote, power and access. And today what is happening is really people expect direct access to their elected officials.
Sure they do.
And you see more and more of those who are successful in elected office providing those avenues for direct access.
Well, I think they like that someone listens.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether you can make anything any better, just being
not.
there. And I talked to the mayor, and she listened.
That's right. It's about respect for people's life journey, for the troubles that they're having, the frustrations they're having, and if they know that you're there to listen, respect, and facilitate, it's 90% of the issue.
I believe that.
It really is. Yeah.
You can tap off a lot of that anger because
absolutely.
The mayor herself listened to me.
That's
I think that's important. I really do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that's true here at the university. We're having a large faculty meeting later this afternoon, and I have a feeling a lot of
Right.
it is going to be about just listening to people
Complain.
It's very cathartic.
It
It's
is.
very
critically
cathartic.
analyze.
It is.
Yeah, it's sort of group therapy for
That's right.
all.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Now, Columbus
Yeah.
State University is a big part of the city.
Yes,
I
it
mean, we
is.
have a large footprint here. How has that benefited the city, and does that benefit CSU as well?
It's a couple of things. First
Okay.
of all, it's workforce development.
Okay.
And when we try to lure these large companies here to come and invest in Columbus, Georgia, one of the things they want to know is about our university system and
Okay.
our technical college system and whatever it may be that we have, but the educational components to our community. And so Columbus State University is invaluable in that regard because they love the fact that we have a component of the state university system here that's so successful, that's been invested in so well, and that people take great pride in. So you have that aspect of it. Obviously, it provides a vibrancy to the community because of the age of the individuals that happen to be in college. Although that's not, there are always those that have come back or delayed, but the average age of those involved tend to be of an era where they're seeing things new and fresh, and so there's a hip factor, a vibrancy factor, and that just adds again a layer of the sophistication of the community. And then, of course, there is the economic development impact.
Okay.
Anytime you put, for instance, 600 individuals downtown living, you're going to have an immediate economic development impact.
Yes.
High density living is what creates retail and job opportunities. Jobs and retail follow population. And so with that kind of vibrancy being injected into any community, you're going to see an economic development return.
We sure are. And you know, what's nice is we're seeing more and more retail growing up down there.
Absolutely.
New restaurants and you know, new stores.
And sort of interesting retail.
Yes.
It's not just a lot of, and no offense to any, but you know, it's not a lot of tax return places and and insurance offices, although very
office.
valuable. Yeah, they're very, very important components and sectors of our business community. But you're seeing, you know, sushi restaurants and you know, Thai
Pizza
restaurants
joints
and outfitters, you know, outdoor outfitters,
a couple of those,
and running
shops.
shops and places where you can paint and create pottery and so more creative outlets and really interesting stuff.
Right. Of course, I think a big piece of that also is the water course.
Of course,
we've got
Whitewater
down there,
which is opening
up in another month or so.
Well, they call it experience economy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a new buzzword, so put that
one
in
down.
your vocabulary.
Yes.
But experience economy is something that this new generation is bringing into our lives, as the one before it brought the internet and other type things, social media, and so now we'll be moving into what they call experience economy. And you know, our economy will be changing as this new era, new generation come about because, you know, yes, they want to be gainfully employed.
Sure.
Certainly they want the paycheck. They got to have it to sustain their lives and their families, as we all have had in the past. But they're going to be balancing more of a quality of life that is a little bit enhanced than perhaps what we experienced when we graduated from college or graduate school, whatever path we took. And so you're going to see them wanting to have jobs where perhaps they get off at 3 so they can go kayak, and they're willing to take a pay cut for that. They're willing to live more, perhaps modestly, smaller homes. So we're starting to plan things like a resurgence of 1,500 square foot homes and 2,000 square foot homes instead of the McMansions and the sprawling, you know, 5 acres and 2 acres. There'll always be an aspect of our housing transect that will have gated golf communities or, you know, whatever. But definitely this next era is going to be individuals who want to live more densely with more population around them. They want to interact with people of different socioeconomic incomes. They consider that to be very stimulating, very interesting. And so you're going to see a resurgence in urban living. And that plays into, of course, our river. The fact that we have a very large urban living environment near our river. So you can have that experience economy. So that's what we're very well positioned for the future because of our investment in Whitewater.
Sure. Yeah, you know, 5 years ago, when I was interviewing for faculty position here, one of the places that that Dr. Conklin here took me was the downtown area, and it impressed me even back then about I enjoyed the very pedestrian type feel of downtown, and it's grown quite a bit even since then, and of course you can see it growing even 5 years from now in terms of that atmosphere down there, and it's very amicable to diversity down there, and as you said, people I think there's a segment of population that's growing, they enjoy the idea of living within a diverse community and interacting with diverse people and going to different types of restaurants and having these different experiences. I think is important.
Absolutely. And you also see really the way that we built the city initially in the late 19th century and early 20th century, when there was really a big boom in Columbus for construction and building, has become more relevant because you have that in-town urban living, and then you have the immediately adjacent sort of suburban, which would be more the Midtown area, which we consider in-town living, of course. But at the time that area was being built in the 20s, that was the suburban area to help support the downtown businesses and so forth, and the businesses helped support their quality of life. And so now you see that coming back into play in a very healthy way.
Sure, yeah.
It's an exciting time for us.
Well, you know, and Uptown Columbus has done so much with that.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
it's amazing.
The concerts and, you know, the market on Saturday, and it's really bringing people down there.
Oh, absolutely.
When we first came here, my wife and I, 12 years ago, you didn't have that.
No, you did not.
And what a change.
Yes, I mean, I remember very vividly being here. Well, now it's a little over 20 years ago. It was before I moved here, but I was here on business, conducted a lot of business in Columbus, and I had a particularly successful business day, and I went to the concierge at the hotel and I said, I want to take my clients out for a celebration. What's the best restaurant in town? And they said Applebee's. And of course, Applebee's is a fabulous restaurant. Right. And I said, oh, okay. You know, thinking we might get something a little local, you know, and a little flair. But and so the next day we had another particularly good day, and I said, well, okay, well, we've been to Applebee's. You know, I'd like to go to the best bar in town. We'll just celebrate in that fashion. And the concierge said, well, let's see, the best bar in town is Applebee's. So it shows you how far we've evolved. Again, Applebee's, great restaurant, great bar. But you know, we certainly have a lot of options now.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
now,
right.
lately, one of the controversies has been doing something with the area at Victory and Veterans.
Yes.
And I know you want to do something with that area.
Yes, we do.
And no matter what, the housing needs to be upgraded.
Oh, absolutely.
And I know that's part of your plan, but I saw some of the renderings in the paper.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of exciting.
Oh, it's very exciting. And it's not, there's nobody opposed to doing those great things.
No.
The problem is, how do you do it? And you have two aspects to that. One is what land is available for this to happen.
Sure. Who's
in control of that land, and how can you either get them on board or get control of the land. And the other aspect is money.
Always.
How exactly is this going to happen, and who's going to pay for it?
Sure.
And sometimes people, when they get into the passionate debate of what they want to have happen, they assume that the money will come like manna from heaven, and it'll all just work out.
Wait, it doesn't work that way?
Yeah, right. And the people that own this property are just going to give it to you.
Here you go.
And so you know, I was in a meeting the other day, and I told a gentleman he had a fabulous idea about doing something with a particular building, and I said, well, that is just fabulous. And he said, well, you know, you're mayor, you need to get out there and execute my idea. And I said, well, you know, first of all, we need to start thinking about these things. Who owns and controls that particular building?
Sure.
And how might this dream come true, so that the city can partner? And there is, I think, a misperception that the government has this endless pot of money, and that when people have good ideas, we just write checks and put all sorts of resources. And actually, what happens inevitably, if the city is a partner in a particular development, we are providing value through tax abatements.
Oh, sure.
We're providing value through bond initiatives of some sort. We're providing value sometimes in the form of money, but it is always, always, always a small percentage match.
Oh, sure.
So you as developer would put up 20 million,
yes,
and we would put up $1 million.
Yeah.
But we would have already done the math to show that the $1 million we're putting up is returning value in the taxes we're going to be getting from your 20 million.
Yeah, sure.
So we would know it was a wash for us, or perhaps we would better our situation. It would be an investment.
Sure.
And so when people say, hey, you know, we don't want this $32 million of private investment. What we'd rather is that the city write a check for $32 million. It doesn't work
that way.
We don't have that pot.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you completely undercutting my whole belief system.
He was ready to put his hands
It's going to be a long lunch for me.
It can work, of course. It just is. It's more methodical, and I hope that gives everybody great peace of mind that their government's not just writing checks. That there's actually a real, legitimate process and checks and balances to make sure that every dime of taxpayer dollars is an investment that we can show some sort of return.
Yeah,
sure.
And that's that reality that we have to
That's
have.
right.
So, you know, earlier you were talking about diversity and in discussing the downtown area and that sort of thing. You were recently at a conference here at CSU that focused on diversity and issues around poverty. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Well, actually, we inherited that particular conference. It's been in existence for a while and was sponsored by CSU and a partner that they have had for years called One Columbus.
Yes.
Now, on a parallel track, for many, many years, we've had the Mayor's Commission on Unity and Diversity.
Okay.
But it had sort of gotten a little well-intended, but a little stale. And it was sort of caught in that sort of 1970s, 1980s education. Let's get people of different cultures together at a festival. Let's have an education conference where we talk about your experience as a Hispanic American and your experience as a, an Italian American, and let's, kind of share that. Well, in today's age, thankfully, we have made a great deal of progress. Not to say that we don't need more, but we typically do know people of different cultural, ethnic backgrounds.
Right.
And so festivals, while still wonderful, it can't be really the totality of us exploring diversity and unity. And one thing that we realized was that, frankly, poverty and the segregation of people by income is a huge issue in this community and frankly across the nation.
Yes.
We tend to live in economically segregated communities, and so that actually has a very heavy racial, gender, and age component, because more minorities live in poverty, more women live in poverty, more elderly or senior citizens live in poverty. And so if we start looking at the component of prosperity and poverty, what does that tell us about racial separation or age separation? And so we added that component to it. Actually, One Columbus ended up merging with our organization. We revamped it completely and ended up sponsoring the Diversity Forum, which had already been set. And it was, I thought, a fabulous success. And we talked very frankly about some of the issues of poverty and what that means, because when you do have failing public schools, a lot of times people draw incorrect, unsubstantiated racial connotations from that, because they'll say, oh, well, that school has a majority of a certain ethnic group and a certain racial group. And the truth is, what it really has is a serious poverty component to it. And so when you start looking at it, again, as something just to add a little context and a little different perspective, look at it through racial lines, certainly. Also look at it through a poverty and prosperity lens, and see if that adds any additional information to it. So we've actually been having really incredible discussions, and we're of course doing research, which we could use interns for.
There you go.
And making a difference.
Oh, and it sounds like it will.
Making a difference,
Well, I need to stop the discussion right here.
Oh, okay.
Because we need to take a break.
Okay.
And I'd just like to remind you, you're watching Education Forum. Hi, we're back on Education Forum with our very special guest, the Mayor of Columbus, Georgia, Teresa Tomlinson.
Hello.
And before the break, we were talking about the poverty issue, but I want to change a little bit and talk about your copper theft task force.
Right.
I remember when you put that in place, I was thinking, why is that important?
Yeah.
But, well, if you could tell us a little bit more about
Of course, we were having issues in the economy where metals were becoming quite valuable, and copper hit a price which it became quite the commodity to have, and particularly for those that perhaps have drug problems and so forth, looking for some quick money. So gutters began flying off of houses.
Remember when they came off the synagogue?
Oh yes,
they
my
took the
goodness.
gutters and downspouts.
The Chamber of Commerce. I mean, some of the churches. It was really horrible.
Yes.
Well, we had one major property manager in the community that came to me and said he lost $500,000 in 1 year.
Okay.
Copper wiring coming out of houses, people literally going into homes that perhaps a renter had vacated before another one moved in, ripping out the walls to get to the copper. Just really extreme stuff. And this was going on all over the country, obviously. And so there were no real answers out there. And we put together a group of the recyclers, the metal recyclers, law enforcement, of course, and large property owners, basically the stakeholders. And what happened is immediately you could see there was this tension where
you're not doing enough.
Yeah, certain folks were blaming the recyclers for, in their mind, facilitating it, encouraging it, and so forth. A lot of vitriol coming from the general community also, that somehow it was the recycle, all of this was their fault.
Sure.
We got to hear their perspective and what safeguards they did have in place and how they felt things were falling through the cracks and coming in. Of course, the recyclers had a lot of ideas about how the police were not and law enforcement weren't doing, and what the property owners weren't doing,
not locking up your stuff
to help.
Always. Yes.
So there was a lot of that initially, and of course a lot of them thought we were there foolishly, that I was just a bright-eyed, naive mayor who thought we could cure such incurable things.
Right.
And but sure enough, we kept on it. I certainly, and it shows you from the office of the mayor, any elected position, if you're serious about something, you really can use the force of the office to affect positive change. And we started coming up with some real solutions, implementing those in practice voluntarily. We did make some tweaks to our local law, asked the state legislature to make some tweaks to the state law, but by and large it was through voluntary cooperation. And the recyclers were absolutely an invaluable part of the equation, and we ended up cutting copper theft 47% and sustained it now for
couple years.
2 years. And so it's still going on very well, and we continue those practices. And in fact, other communities from really across the country have called us. We've developed a little brochure about how we did it, and provide that to law enforcement agencies throughout the country that like more information on that. But it was we were able through that effort to develop some innovative law enforcement techniques. But it does show you that when you share information with the stakeholders of any particular problem and really can moderate the concerns and the finger pointing, you can really get down to solving some issues.
Well, and I believe that. I mean, you've seen such a major impact. They busted some big players too.
Huge players. And I'll tell you what, it makes the cost of business for that particular illegal activity so high that they tend to go somewhere else. And, and that's fine. I'd like to cure it altogether, but really what we want to do is get it out of here, and hopefully share our successful information with other jurisdictions so they can then begin to fight it there. You make the cost of business high enough, and it's not worth it for them to steal that.
I know that's true of Jeff. In fact, I don't know if we've got tape of it, but we have tape somewhere around the studio of Jeff going through the refrigerator in the faculty lounge, not getting copper so much, but he's pulling off aluminum foil as lunches.
I see.
He doesn't understand the economic piece of copper and aluminum, but it's still happening. That's concerning to me.
But I remember that you had people stealing spools of copper wire from the utilities in town.
Right. Well, what we realized was we did have a couple of sort of groups, small groups of of individuals that were effectuating most of the illegal activity. And so once we were able to get them and lock them up, it began to precipitously drop. And then people, it's just basic economics for all the economic students out there. And then fewer people were joining the market because of the high cost of doing business. So we locked up those that had figured out a very efficient and effective way to do it. We locked them up, and nobody else wanted to enter the market.
Nobody wanted to jump in at that point.
Of course, I also think there's people in the community are a little more vigilant and looking, kind of watching a little more.
Right.
But it's interesting, and what I've wondered is, when I read about somebody being arrested for that sort of thing, oftentimes I read about how they were caught at the recycler.
Yes. Absolutely.
The recycler is the one that calls, and I'm curious, how is it, what's that component? What is the person that the recycling place, what is it that they do that they can tell, okay, this is not legitimate?
Well,
obviously they don't call
of course
everybody.
they take in a lot of it, and so they have a pretty good idea of what doesn't look like something that might have come out of your house. And so
spools of wire,
there's a big difference from the type of scrap metal that's being brought in because you were cleaning out your attic, and all of a sudden all of this industrial grade copper wiring coming in. Also, if it looks like it's been pulled out of walls and is mangled up, then that's something that's kind of interesting. Where did that come from exactly? Are you in the construction business, and how did you come about this? So, and also things that were happening where they were taking coils from air conditioners. So when somebody showed up with 16 air conditioner coils,
that's probably a little abnormal.
They're either in the air conditioning business and can state that, or something is going on.
I see.
And so it was those types of telltale signs and some other things we had going on. But they do have to show an ID, and they do have to provide some basic information when anytime they are trying to cash in scrap metal. And also if somebody comes in that has something that is an ornate copper piece that they want to exchange for scrap, that's also a sign, because you can look at it and know that probably cost $2,000 because of the fact that it's an artistic type thing. And obviously it was sculpted and so forth. And so why would anybody who own it
want to just dump it?
So there's again some telltale signs, and we rely very heavily on the scrap metal dealers. They also looked to see if they had regular customers, and why they were regular customers. If they were in, again, the demolition business, well, that would explain, why. But if they weren't, maybe a
somebody with
a
really large attic.
Right, a really large attic, right.
Okay, to shift gears a little bit, earlier on we talked about how you made some changes in the pension plan to save money.
That's right.
Recently you did something in the medical care area for city employees as well. I think that's a very big thing.
Well, medical care is something that a lot of communities have been struggling with for their public employees, and a lot of businesses have been struggling with for their employees. And I think really across the board, large employers have been seeing their health care costs rise about 10% a year. Well, that's crippling.
Yes, it is.
It's absolutely crippling. And we looked at our costs and tried to figure out what the patterns were. Really high use of emergency room care for things for chronic conditions like high blood pressure, symptoms and effects from diabetes. So you've got chronic conditions, and they're basically having them treated in the emergency room, which is about a $1,600 a pop at least.
Just showing up.
And so if something could have been seen during business hours at the doctor, for $60 or whatever, instead of $1,600, then, or if they could be seen more regularly before, God forbid, they had the stroke, or before their foot needed to be amputated or something, then of course that has much less cost. So we figured out pretty quickly that we needed to have an aspect to our employees' health care that provided a really easy access to basic general practice care. And we had our former human resources director who just recently retired but has stayed on in a consulting capacity to help us with this effort, had been to conferences and been keeping his ears and eyes opened about what was best practices in other communities, and communities that had adopted these employee clinics that were very accessible to the employees were seeing a reduction in their costs, certainly a stabilization where it wasn't increasing
10% a year,
10% a year. And so we're looking at, I mean, these are all rough estimates, and in the first year maybe some things we have to work out, but we're hoping several $100,000 to perhaps even as much as $1 million a year savings from not having those spiraling costs. So that will be a huge effect for the taxpayer, big savings, but also we'll have a much healthier employee population.
Which is extremely important. Now, is it required that employees and their families go there?
No, it's voluntary. You sign up, and in fact, we could only take about 600 in the first sign-up session, and we're not quite complete with that. I think we have about 500 people have signed up so far. So there's still some room. People can go into HR and sign up. I've signed up, the city manager signed up, all of our department heads. So, it's really going very well. I have beautiful clinic facilities that are actually in some of the medical office space near the medical center. So it's the type of medical office you would expect to see. Very professional, fabulous physician we were able to get. And it's just really exciting. And so far they've already said that people are coming in. We've had one employee report that he expects to save $100 a month because of this, because there's no copay. They also administer some basic medications from the clinic, cost-free if they're basic medications, and that saves those copays that you pay when you go to the local pharmacy. So here we have one employee saving $100 a month. That's after tax, $100 a month. That's real money, obviously, and that's like a pay raise.
Sure it is. Absolutely.
Sure it is.
So
So it's a lot of copper.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly
for somebody like Jeff. That's a lot of aluminum foil.
A lot of aluminum foil. Yeah.
Absolutely.
What do you see as future goals and plans for Columbus? Where do you see us going?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what the future holds for Columbus, Georgia. We are a mid-sized city, and the future is going to be for mid-sized cities. Certainly, there's always going to be a place for New York and LA and Chicago and Atlanta, and those are certain environments that people certainly find to be desirable. But this next era is going to be an era where people want a little bit slower pace of life, a little bit more control over their time, and access to certain things that enhance their quality of life more immediately. So no more hour commutes both ways type living. Those are going to be things that certainly I'm sure will be available if people do desire it, but I think are going to be less and less chosen voluntarily by people. So mid-sized cities such as Columbus, 200,000 population, are really going to be the rage, and are already starting to see them become more and more in demand. But those mid-sized cities are going to have an element of sophistication about them, and we certainly do here, not just with our whitewater experience, tourism and experience economy we've been talking about, but the River Center, $70 million cultural arts center. We've got a fabulous Columbus Museum, the Infantry Museum. We have a transportation network, including some alternative transportation aspects, such as our Rails to Trails. When you take the Rails to Trails, which is such a phenomenal amenity, and our Riverwalk, you're looking at almost 30 miles of contiguous, near contiguous, as soon as we get the Talbotton Road project done, biking and walking trails. And so we were recently named one of, I think, 5 or 6 cities that's Running City USA, and that's one of the reasons. And so you see us having a very high quality of life, great amenities like the skating rink and the public library, our new pool, the new aquatic center that's coming in, online this summer. It's very impressive, and so you can be from Atlanta, as I am, and know the level of sophistication Atlanta offers, and still have your needs met in Columbus, Georgia, and yet be able to come home for lunch at work, not have to take a half-a-day vacation to meet your air conditioner repairman. Have a real quality of life, and be able to have relationships with your neighbors and people in your community that the much larger cities just tend not to cultivate as well.
Sure. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up
Oh,
with
okay.
that. So,
well, great. Well,
I
it's
would
been
like
a lot
to
of fun.
thank you for coming on. It
Well,
was
thank
wonderful.
you guys. Yeah.
I'd like to again thank our special guest, the Mayor of Columbus, Georgia, Teresa Tomlinson, and this is Education Forum.